With me today is Sheriff Eric Aden. Sheriff Aden has been the Okaloosa County Sheriff for the last 4 years. He's running for re-election this year and will be on the ballot on August the 20th. And so, Sheriff, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to go ahead and tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I was born here, born on Eglin Air Force Base to a young pilot, young captain, and he was an aerospace engineer. We like the area. Both of our family, my mother's side and father's side, was not too far away from here in Alabama. And so we had just come, as a typical military family from California as a young lieutenant and pilot in training school out there at Edwards, was transferred here and was born on Eglin Air Force Base. And after that, my dad, a couple of years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, decided he wanted to switch over to civil service and design missile systems. So he was an aerospace engineer, basically a rocket scientist. And my mom was a 25-year school teacher here at Shalimar Elementary. I pretty much spent my whole life in Okaloosa, other than 4 years at Florida State. But I had a passion as a young man. Actually, I have 5 kids and beautiful wife, and I even have a little granddaughter, and have 4 daughters, and they're range from 22 down to 17, and then I have a young 9-year-old boy. So I am blessed to have been able to raise my family here in the community that I love, and I had decided early on when I was a young man. I know that having all those children, it's interesting because none of them really know what they want to do when they grow up. So I know it's an anomaly that when I was a young man, I actually knew fairly early on what I wanted to do. And so I had an aspiration as a young man to be the sheriff. Didn't really know how to get there, but I kind of set my goal out to do that. I went off to Florida State, the #1 criminology school in the country, and incredible program there, and studied criminal justice, criminology. When I was going to school there, I actually came back and interned here at the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, and that's where my passion really was. And I tell this story often. A lot of times people are like, or my mom, I tell the story that my mom said, well, don't you want to stay and go to law school? I said, heck no, I want to come home and make $17,000 a year as a deputy sheriff. That's how much my passion was for the job. And couldn't wait to get in the saddle and get out here and actually help and keep the public safe and provide law and order for the public. And just it was my dream. I couldn't wait to get in that role. So I came back here and I went to the academy, and I was picked up right after the academy and went into work for the sheriff's office immediately upon finishing the academy in January of '95. I worked the road for a few years. I was an SRO, did a bunch of different things, and I kind of had aspirations to maybe go to the feds and then come back, and that would have been a terrible idea. The Lord kept me here, which was great. I had opportunity to go to the feds, had opportunity to go to the state and work, and I just kept wanting to stay in this area. I did some banking and finance while I was going through that application process. It's really been rewarding to have that banking and finance background in the job that I do, because I oversee such a large budget. I'm a numbers guy, and I try to crunch those numbers to be fiscally conservative and be able to still provide a good wage to our employees. So I went back into law enforcement. I was in law enforcement, went part-time for a while, did the banking and finance, and I came back into law enforcement. Was also a U.S. Marshal on the Fugitive Task Force, worked in the region basically from about Mobile, Alabama to around Marianna, Florida, and up into lower Alabama. That was our Gulf Coast Regional Task Force. And that was fun times. It was exciting. I came back when Larry Ashley got elected, basically transferred as from a lieutenant in Walton County over to a lieutenant over here. And Sheriff Ashley put me to work as a judicial lieutenant. So I got to know the inside and out of court security. We were involved in the new courthouse at the time over on the fairgrounds. And so we got to be on the tail end of that. And then I was a part of the, committee of designing the security of the courthouse in Crestview. So those were very educational areas for me. And a couple of years into my return here to the sheriff's office, people knew what my background was. People knew what my, dream was. And I got approached about, would I be interested in running for sheriff one day? And it was certainly an honor that I got approached about that. And I, of course, said yes. So the wheels in motion started moving around where I was moved into different roles of the sheriff's office, and basically stayed a mid-level manager for a few years and moved into all those different roles that I would be able to, CID, patrol, doing things that I hadn't done in a while, and getting my feet wet back into that. Then I moved up, progressed from a lieutenant to, a captain. Then I moved up to major, where I was over operations. And the last stint that I really had before running for sheriff, I was lucky enough to get selected to go to the FBI National Academy in 2019. So I went in 2019. It was absolutely the most enriching law enforcement experience and personal experience that I've ever had. I'm a history fanatic, and being around Washington and being around all that history was absolutely awesome. I spent every minute that I could that I wasn't in class and studying to actually enjoy those times, because I remember a childhood vacation up there and just being enamored by all of that history and how our country was founded. But coming home from the National Academy and graduating, Sheriff Ashley put me in my last and final role, which was an administrative major, which is probably the most difficult executive position we have here, because it oversees all the things of the sheriff's office. And I can kind of get into that in a few minutes of the actual sheriff's office and how we're made up. But the things are very hard, because that's the part that keeps the machine of the green and white cars out on the road and everything. It's buying the vehicles and buying the boats and procuring softwares and handling IT and HR and hiring and terminating and all those different things that come along with it. So it was certainly a learned experience, and one that I'm glad that I was put in, but I was grateful when I was no longer in that role, because it was very challenging. So after that, I filed to run, and so I ran unopposed. It was the first unopposed election for sheriff in the history of our county, which was over 100 years old at the time. And so I was honored that the community and the agency and all the people that I built relationship with had the confidence enough in me to support me to run. And I ran as if I had opponents. I ran for about a year. And then I ultimately won in June of 2020, took office late Christmas or late New Year's Eve on the 31st, which basically was effective the following morning. And then my term actually started on the 4th of January of 2021. But I was appointed for those couple of days because Larry Ashley had gone ahead and resigned. So I was appointed, and then my actual term that I had won the election for was effective January 4th of 2021. So I've been the sheriff since January of 2021. So 3.5 years now, going on in my fourth year here, and at the end of this year it will be the 4th year.
So you guys had over at the sheriff's office, you guys deal with a lot of different stuff, and I kind of assume that all executive leaders have a points of singularity where they look at something for the next term or the next period of time and say, these are our goals. What are your goals if you are to win re-election?
Well, our goals right now are to continue to build the relationships, continue to be a pinnacle of training that we are. I know that's come under some scrutiny here as of late, as far as questions about that, but we are a model agency when it comes to training. But we are enhancing our training just to take that added level of professionalism that our public deserves. But the other thing is to build those relationships in some of the areas that may not feel that we support them as well. So we're certainly working on that, as any law enforcement is around the country. It's difficult right now to be in law enforcement. So our goals are to continue to provide a decent wage for our employees to try and keep them here. One, wage and benefits are what keep you here, but also good leadership is what keep you here. I mean,
in the last 6 months, we've had 2 incidents that have gone national, for lack of a better term. Right. And the 2 opponents that you have in this race have both mentioned, at least to us here at Mid-Bay News, that the main thrust of their campaigns are going to revolve around training, especially one of them. And they say that these incidents could have been prevented with more training. So I guess the question is twofold. Do you believe that these incidents still would have happened if you guys had more training? And what do you have to say about the claim that there's not enough training going on at the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office?
Well, I think those are absolutely false. We are a model agency for training. I'll give you some reasons why. And you or anybody is welcome to come out to our training facility. First and foremost, our training facility was bought and paid for and that was the vision of my predecessor, Larry Ashley, is nearly a $5 million training facility we've put money into. Not only that, because it's not just about the facility, it's about the training that's done at the facility. It's such a model facility that not just the local municipalities, not just county, not just state, such as my opponent works for or was working for, and the feds all train there. And we have a force-on-force Milo machine, which is state of the art. It literally, and so here's some of the things that we go through. These are required by the state every 4 years, and that's scenario-based firearms training, psychological dynamic training, less lethal force training, review of all the policies of use of force, and review of legal aspects regarding use of force. Those are supposed to be done once every 4 years. We do them annually, once a year. So we do it 4 times more than that's required by the state. We've met all of our criminal. We're accredited. We've been accredited for more than a decade, and there are 10 mandatory standards and 22 recommended standards. We meet all of those. We were just reviewed 2 years ago, and we'll be up for renewal this year. We have brought in something called Force Science, and they come in and review our, in addition to the accreditation that reviews our policies and procedures, and for best practices. And most agencies like us have very similar policies. Going back to those 2 cases, Chris, if you didn't know this, over the last 4 years, we've had nearly 1 million contacts with individuals, nearly 1 million. 980,000, I believe, is the contacts we've had over the last 4 years. That's a lot of contacts with citizens, many of them violent. I mean, what we do is we go to hot calls. I mean, that's what cops and law enforcement do around the state. Certainly sheriffs do. And I would say that out of those, we have had 2 incidences to your point. Both of those are human error. I mean, we hire humans, and the point that's important to make about those is we were completely transparent. We were completely credible, and our integrity was never in question, and we certainly communicated to our public as needed. And the bottom line, and most importantly, is we were accountable for those actions. We took action in both of those cases, and we took appropriate action. And both of those cases have as far as the sheriff's office is our role is out of those cases at this time. Now, the state has still got one of those cases and was working on that. So I don't even know the details of their criminal investigation. I do not have anything in writing in their criminal investigation. They will determine whether there were any state statutes violated as far as the state attorney once she receives the report. And there will be a determination as to whether or not criminal charges were brought. Now, we did see that our officer in both those cases violated our policy. So it goes back to, I had the question, and it's a valid question, is, do you need to change your policy? Well, our policy was violated. So why would we change the policy? I mean, it was a human error, and the policy was violated. And in the first case, no one was injured, no one was shot, thank God. In the other case, we have the tragedy that we saw come out where you had an individual who was not committing a crime that came to his door and knew that we were at the door, and unfortunately, our officer was met with a firearm and made a choice to take action, and we deem that to be not reasonably objective. And that's the end. That's the ultimately, and then I had to come behind that to all our officers to make sure that they felt still, that they would be able to go home without being shot in a situation like that. And so I had to explain to them, hey, read our policy. If you're basing a decision off of a very split-second video, then you're no better than anyone in New York or Miami or anywhere else. Read the report in its entirety. What I want to make sure is that my public and my staff is aware that the process is fair. There's a lot of people that armchair quarterback this decision, one side or the other. But one thing I could tell them is read the report in its entirety. And if you feel that it wasn't fair, come see me, because the decision we made was fair. The decision we made was the only decision we can make, because at the end of the day, that we can't sacrifice the public that we serve at their pleasure for a mistake that was made by one of our deputies, period. Doesn't mean that the next deputy won't get it right. It doesn't mean that deputy did or did not commit a crime in that particular case. What it means is that that we will hold, our people to that the standard that's required by our policy, and that person didn't meet up with that standard.
Switching gears a little bit to talk about another thing you mentioned earlier, the sheriff's office pay. To me, as I understand it, as I've looked through pay for various police agencies here locally, and then kind of the Pensacola, Escambia, those areas, it seems to be relatively competitive. But it also seems, as we've seen, the cost of living here increased dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years. What is the plan to continue to recruit law enforcement professionals, either locally or out of state, to get them to come here to walk the streets, walk the beat? What ideas do you have in mind? I know a couple of years ago we talked about a almost like a barrack style thing for junior fresh sheriff's deputies fresh out of the academy. Is there something like that still on the books, or do you have other plans to combat this cost of living issue that everybody's seeing here?
Great question, Chris. And that is one of the biggest challenges. I mean, I actually didn't include it in my goals because I really have little control over it. But I know that our commissioners, Paul Mixon, and some of the other commissioners, Mel Ponder, we are working diligently with the military to try, and the chamber has greatly been, Ted from the chamber has greatly been helpful in trying to connect those pieces to do something that we've really never done before. And that is, obviously we don't want to affect the mission. But to your point, all of us, my goal when I first started on the workforce housing project with realtors and all the entities I just named, my goal was to try and find some sort of, and I did a survey with my staff about 2 years ago. Would you care if you lived in an apartment? Would you, if it was a rent controlled apartment, or do you want the white picket fence that we all, dream of? Frankly, to be honest, there was a lot of people that wanted that white picket fence with a yard and a house. So we've got to see how we can get there, because right now I have deputies that are living in Milton, and frankly, I lost a lot of dispatchers a while back to one of my friends and peers because they were already living in their county. And it was like, I get 3 hours back every day of my life that I don't have to drive back and forth. And with the cost of gas and all that, that's not even the housing issue, Chris. So then we look at the housing issue. My goal was to have some sort of barracks, maybe barracks is a bad term, but more like an apartment complex that was rent controlled. There's been a model of that before built in other areas. I believe Bay County did one with St. Joe, and it doesn't have to be law enforcement. Hey, everybody should benefit from this, but we don't get BAS or BAH, excuse me. And the military does, but I realize that our wages are higher. So it kind of balances out. So there is a component that the military can benefit from, but so can our teachers, our firemen, our police, our law enforcement. There needs to be some sort of deed restriction, because the problem is, Chris, is if you develop, and I did mortgages and finance extensively for a few years, so I know how it works, is that if you build a house and you give a good deal to a deputy, let's say that, hey, we're going to sell you this house for $160,000. Hot dog, they're going to get in it, okay? And they're going to be able to afford it. But if they leave our career field, or if they just decide, hey, I'm going to sell it, if there's no control on that, then they flip it for $300,000, then the next person doesn't benefit from that. So this is a long conversation that me and you are not going to solve, but there are people in play that are working diligently, and the military is open to helping us try and find a solution. Because as you know, some of their base housing, you grew up here, or I grew up here, and you've been here long enough, that our base housing, some of those places they're having to vacate and they're not rebuilding, and there's plans for maybe some of those places. As long as a mission is so important to this community that we don't want to affect the mission. And we have a very unique county here. And so, but we really, really need to get our people. And my peers on the right and left of me are dealing with the same thing, because Santa Rosa County is exploding and bursting at the seams. Freeport is the fastest growing city for its size in the state, if not the United States. It's absolutely exploding. Hurricane Michael, didn't help anything, because it put a strain on the people that were living over there. And so they all flooded over into Walton County. So I could go on, but all of us in Northwest Florida struggle with that. So the only way you can, because we're all trying to bring fish in the same well, so to speak, qualified applicants is what we're looking for. but yet they don't want to be house poor, or house rich and cash poor, or cash poor and house poor, and they try to move here. And some of my staff have to live in the outcropping areas, and we'd go all the way up to Alabama, but that makes a long day when you're a 12-hour employee, and some days those days are 13 hours, and you put 2 more hours in a drive. And I don't have to tell you what the traffic's like going up north after a long day's work. I mean, it's grueling. So yeah, those are one of the biggest challenges that we face, not just in law enforcement, but again, anyone in those beginning brackets of income, of first responders, school teachers, firemen. We all need to try and find a way to be able to add surplus, which will help generate tax revenue of some kind, but do it in a way that we can somehow cap the amount that they make on the sale if they sell it, or that it's a rental type situation. But yeah, we're working with people on that. We hope that it comes to fruition faster, because that's what will get jobs here. And then there's other ideas about, those mid-level, GS jobs out there where they're also struggling with trying to find a house. Think about it. They've lived somewhere and they have this beautiful, elaborate house, and they move here and they can get, half as nice of a house for the money. It's not as attractive. The community itself only goes so far. People want that quality of house that they dream of living in.
I'm really excited to ask you about this question, because you got the law enforcement background, but you also have a long background in finance, specifically in housing and dealing with all that kind of stuff. This half-cent sales tax that we passed in 2018 is fixing to come up on its 10-year anniversary when it sunsets. Should we renew this half-cent sales tax here in 2028? And should we even increase it? What are your thoughts on something like that?
But I do believe it has been an absolute benefit, and the school system has benefited from it once they did it. And, yes, a large contingency of it is paid from our visitors and not, our people that live here, but we pay for it too. And that's why, we showcase those things like the training facility that was purchased with half-cent sales dollars, and our radio system, our new, the radio CAD RMS system that we're implementing. All of those things were based on half-cent sales tax dollars. And so it has allowed, what it's really allowed me to do is allowed me to be able to help with salaries and bring them up better than what we've had in the past, because of using that half-cent sales tax to buy capital items that normally a sheriff would have to buy.
What's the nearest alligator to the boat?
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Yeah, I will tell you this. So that's a great question as well, and a good one to end on. That is that domestic violence is one of the biggest things all law enforcement faces, but that's been a challenge probably from the beginning of time, and it's something that we continue to fight. But what I will tell you, what is crushing our citizens is the overdose of fentanyl and heroin. And we have seized over $4.5 million in assets or fentanyl and drug and opioids in my administration. So, and we've cracked down on the violent crime. But what I will say is that we got a concerted effort with Chief Beige from Fort Walton and the other chiefs in the municipalities. But Chief Beige kind of got out there with the health department and us, and we have we've teamed with the Northwest Florida Health Network, and we're going to go out there. It's a model for when you go out to an overdose. Obviously, if you go out to a suicide, it's too late to do anything. You go out to an overdose, sometimes it's too late to do anything as well. God forbid that we can't bring them back with Narcan. But it is killing so many of our youth, and there is no demographic and no age group that it doesn't touch. I mean, we're seeing overdoses in fentanyl in elderly people now. And it goes all the way down to the youth in the schools. So what I'll tell you is that we've got to get a handle on it, and we're working with the health department and our partners with all of the first responders and public safety. EMS has got a great program, and we're working in conjunction with them. And what we're going to do is we're going to send a community resource deputy, and Chief Beige is going to send one of his community resource deputies if it's in his municipality. Same with Chief Hart, and same with Chief the new chief whoever comes into Niceville, Chief McCosker at Crestview. We're all working together to send someone out in the field law enforcement as well as a help network person that will go out there and say, what resources do you need? Because there are statistics that prove that if you can get out there within 24 to 48 hours of someone overdosing, then you can stop the next overdose and probably get them some help. So we're excited about that. It's just in the very infantile stages, but that's going to be something that I'm very interested to see what the analytic data shows us as to how successful it is. But I really am excited about that program. That is one of the biggest challenges that are facing all law enforcement, and we have a high propensity of overdoses in this county, hundreds per year. And we don't even know, Chris, how many we're having now, because when we first started seeing this uptick in around 10 years ago, we started carrying Narcan. We were one of the first agencies to carry Narcan, but now Narcan is available, and I'm fine with it. But Narcan's available in any of the pharmacies for your loved one. So if you're living with someone that you know has a drug problem, you're probably going to buy Narcan because you don't want them to pass away, obviously. Or if you're a user yourself, my point is, we don't even know how many overdoses that we're not going to because they're being Narcan by their own friends and family members. It's scary. So it's something we have got to get a hold on. And one of the things is going to be, again, come election time, I certainly hope you vote for me, but I also hope that you vote for change so that we can try and shut down a lot of what's coming across the border, because our drugs are flooding across the border. Meth is flooding at an in ways that it's never come across our border. We're not seeing little grams we're seeing pounds and pounds of meth now, and all of it's being cross-contaminated. And I'll tell you this, a lot of people used to say when I was growing up, as a kid, don't smoke weed, it could be laced with LSD and all this. And I think it may have been a way to try and deter children from doing it, but it literally is laced with fentanyl. We've literally had to Narcan people that were smoking marijuana, because it's all being cross-contaminated coming from China, coming from Mexico, coming across our borders, and we have got to stop it.
Sheriff Eric Aden is the Okaloosa County Sheriff, and he is running for re-election. That election takes place on August the 20th. It's in the Republican primary, but everybody is allowed to vote in that election. Sheriff Aden, thank you so much for your time and for being a part of this Mid-Bay News elections process.
Chris, I really enjoyed it. VoteAiden.com. Thank you.